Have you ever taken one of your D&D players aside and whispered to them about information only they know? Just to have them rejoin with the party and tell them everything you just told them to the rest of the group? Well, you might be using whispers in a less than ideal way for your group of players. In this video, I'm going to share how I use whispers to elevate my game, turning even when my players decide they want to go into a government office building to get an ID, an extremely fun time using them. The first step to really using anything well is to understand why and when you should use them. So when I first sat down and thought about it, I really wanted to nail in place what exact feeling do whispers give players to help inform my decision on when I should use them. It gives a lot of different things, but one thing it does so very well when you set aside a player and single them out is it brings this feeling of isolation. They truly are alone now in the game, and we can use this intentionally when we want to give a feeling of loneliness, stress, or panic about what might be happening on the other side of things. But it can also give empowerment, as they become completely autonomous for their character. No one else can give input in this moment but them. Not only does this empower one player, but this can create mystery and curiosity for the other players at the table as well. The best use for whispers is to play off these emotions. This is what it takes to make something from just a mindless repeating of information back to your party to something that feels impactful, like it's going to make a narrative moment stronger in the game instead of just being told information alone. Just before we get into what you can actually do with whispers, I want to tack in one more thing that this does amazingly before we move on. It teaches players that they can request things without their party's knowledge and do things without their party's knowledge. By pulling aside a player, you show them that it's an option to talk to you directly without anyone else from the party knowing what you're talking about. It lets them know that they can speak up and request things, or let you know about something sneaky they might have did. For example, I once snapped off a petrify guy's finger that we were thinking about unpetrifying on my character's board. I wouldn't have did this if the rest of my party would have had the knowledge. Now that we've talked about the emotions, you might be rethinking the times you've used whispers that just got repeated back instantly without a second thought. And I'm here to say that it's okay to use whispers like this, and it's okay to guide your players directly with them too. But when you are about to give a whisper, think about if it's just better to say it out loud. Now, every party is a little different on what they find should be repeated and what they want to keep to themselves. But it's kind of like a scale, and you can, with time, determine where your party lies on that scale. At one side of the scale, we have generic information they rolled for or noticed with passive perception. For most parties, they'll probably just repeat this info back, but some parties, like Critical Role, like to keep these things secret, and that's okay too. In the middle of that scale is information relating to their backstories, class, or species. Where this can still be information they roll for, it's more exact to the player's character, like your ranger noticing a tuft of werewolf hair by a city door that the cleric wouldn't have noticed. In my opinion, this works best in whispers when they have multiple people that I'm going to give information to that's unique information. And finally, at the far end of the scale that is almost always better in whispers for every party, is things related to their backstory that aren't yet revealed to other players. Things like your player's past experience being in a cult that none of your friends know about, making it easier for them to notice cult-like behavior. These are things that your players should be choosing to reveal rather than you choosing the reveal for them. And sometimes they might share the whisper, but sometimes they might choose to keep it private due to the hidden information. Now that we have our scale, let's disregard it completely to now talk about puzzles using information instead, to try and invoke feelings of being not prepared and panic. In this method, everything and anything can be hidden. But the key feature here is realizing if you allow your players to just instantly and easily repeat back the information you just told them, it is completely in vain. So what do we do to avoid that and make it fun? It's simple, really. We limit their ability to communicate or how to communicate a piece of the puzzle. Now, this gimmick works amazingly sometimes for puzzles, but you can do it in many different ways. I've played 2 sessions with communication puzzles recently that put a priority on players being proactive in their autonomy and giving them a feeling of unprepared panic. In fact, that DMV session, that trip to the government office building, also used this tactic to reduce communication. When my players requested to go there and get false IDs, at first I sat down and I thought, shit, how am I going to make this fun? But it turns out it was actually super easy. In a world where there isn't information readily available to confirm a person's identity, instead they might use a guarantor. So before the puzzle started, I had them all roll an investigation, and based on their rolls, I gave them information that ranged from blatantly bad hints to good info about what's about to happen. Things can start to get really spicy with these puzzles when you start to include misinformation in whispers. When the group felt that they had a plan, I then showed them what was about to go down. I asked the first guarantor to leave the room, and then from a random table of personal life questions, I pulled 3 questions. As the rest of the party sat and watched, I asked the guarantor to come back in, and then started to ask the same 3 questions. This is where the rest of the party realized they were horribly unprepared, that they would have to do something to get information covertly to the guarantor. And once they figured out a trick to get information into this room, they had then saw the 3 questions, and they thought, okay, we'll just prepare for those questions between going in. But then I hit them with different questions every time, and the situation escalated in difficulty to send information from one room to the other. This all started from a mix of real information and misinformation that they prepared for via whispers. Not everything you whisper to players needs to actually be true. Include information mimics. Deceive your players sometimes, and it'll go such a long way in making a puzzle a lot more complicated and fun. Now, what I'm drawing today is actually a perfect example of misinformation, but instead of onto the party, onto a whole city. This is Old Fast Stables, a ranch located in the lower city of Encombe. Raising and training fire beetles for transportation in this very, very vertical city that's sewn up and along the infinite caves and cliffs of the Earth plane. These beetles are bred for the rich, allowing easy transformation from the lower poor parts of the city to the very top rich communities. And while poor civilians can't afford these beetles, that doesn't mean that they aren't highly sought after in less than legal ways. But this is just what they do as the face of their business. Hidden below the veil of darkness, they transport illegal products into the upper city. If you love creating stories, but find world building takes so much time, or you just need some ideas to kickstart your world, check out my Patreon where I'm building an entire setting book for a huge city of Encombe, a city nestled on the border of the infinite caves of the Earth plane and the barren, ashen wastes of the Fire plane. And I plan on occasionally dropping things for free members there too, in the future. So come on by. Link in description. The other way I've recently played works great for more of a dungeon or less social of a puzzle. Just a couple of days ago, I played a dungeon where no one could speak. It had a zone of silence thrown on top of it. The first room taught them about the silence. The second room taught them about the Hollyfent prisoners, and the final boss fight room had a puzzle about getting dragon elements from the fountains onto the crystal cages of the opposite element that held the Hollyfent's prisoners, forcing them to heal or buff the monsters every turn. The key here was a war of nutrition, and a game of how do you communicate to your friends after discovering the secrets of the fountain in time. But it also had this amazing upside that multiple people could have discovered and solved the puzzles thanks to whispers. Puzzles make fantastic uses for whispers. But what about the things that aren't puzzles? My next favorite use of this is for much more of an introspective, isolating, and solo of an event. Something that no one can truly understand the meaning of, but the player partaking in it. Death scenes. When you are on death's door, no one but the dying can really understand the experience. So not only can you give a moment to the rest of the party to react to the player's death as a group without the player, but you can also dive into what's happening to the dying player as they die. And I'm probably going to make an entire video on how to make this moment grand, because the amount of options on how to do this just deserve their own video. So I hope to see you then in the future. There are several other moments that also give this feeling, though far less extreme. Moments where the players run off on their own ahead or away from the party. Dreams and visions, especially nefarious ones, or even communing with the gods are a great example of when to isolate player from the party when talking to them. And finally, the last thing we're going to be talking about here can also be so fun, but isn't for every party out there. Create discourse using whispers. Encourage that occasional moment where the party won't see eye to eye. Push people to do things against the rest of the party's will, or things that are just outright a little evil. A great example of this is Alara in the last campaign we completed, before moving those characters onto our current campaign. Alara went and murdered a guy they promised they were just taking somewhere else with Azira. The discourse caused both Alara and Azira to then lie about it to the rest of their party, giving a moment between two players in their shared lie. They then had something to really play off of in roleplay, allowing them to bond and talk about how they felt about lying to everyone else. Saying they didn't like the feeling, even though I'm sure they're probably going to lie to the party again in the future. But is that not the most human thing we can do? Talk about something we did wrong and then proceed to do it again as time passes by. Use whispers in many ways, but always have a reason as to why you're using them in the moment instead of choosing to say it to the whole group. If you've stuck around to this point, I'd love to hear about the best time where someone in your game lied in character, and have a fantastic day.